Hello. This is my upcoming book, Two Vamps One Stake. It is available for pre-order right now in most places that you can get books, and direct from me if you live in the UK. It is the first in the Claretbury Chronicles novels, and it follows Billy, who is an urban fantasy series. It follows Billy, who is a monster hunter who has been sent by the Hunters Guild to the foggy town of Claretbury that is currently run by a mob of vampires. That's the premise. I love this book so much. I'm so proud of it. No, I've been promising basically since I started talking about Claretbury in 2023 when I first had the idea for Claretbury. I've been talking about how writing Claretbury Chronicles is different from writing any of the other books I've written. And the reason for that is that this book is coming out in October. And these are the rest of the series. Obviously, these are not books yet, but when it comes to every other series I've written, and trust me, because I've written 4 separate universes worth of books, 5 now, I have, when it's a series, which only 3 of them are, I have written and published book 1, and then written and published book 2. And then, well, I haven't got to book 3 for any of them yet, because I've got 2 duologies and 1 ongoing series. But then it would be write and publish book 3, then it would be write and publish book 4, and so on and so forth, for as many books as the series requires. With Claretbury, as proven by this stack here, I didn't do that. I wrote all of them kind of all in one go. So very much did do it as like book 1 solid draft. And then, but I didn't finish it. Context. Here's how I write books. I've talked about this before, but I'll talk about it again really quick just now. Basically, when I write books, I don't use outlines because I find outlines to be a nightmare. I can never think of what to put in them for a start. For a start, I don't know what goes in an outline. And for a second, when I have tried to do outlining, I just end up either feeling trapped by it or going completely off the rails, at which point it feels like such a waste to have bothered with the outline. Or I just can't think of anything to put in the outline, and I'm just like, I don't know what goes there, and I don't know how to get any further than that. And so far, in my 5 years of publishing experience, I have learned that my best bet is to just draft and then redraft and then redraft again and just keep going like that until I have a whole book. So basically what I was doing with Claretbury Chronicles was I would draft and redraft book 1, because that usually gets me like, usually by draft 3 I've got a solid like not full book, but like the spaces are less than the content I have figured out how to put in. Like I figured out more of the words that need to be there than the spaces where the words should be. And then once I'd done that, I started on book 2 and I did the same thing. And then I went through it, book 1 and 2, as if it was one really long story. And again, that like building it up. And then I did book 3 the same way. 1, 2, 3 drafts, then going all the way through. And then book 4, 1, 2, 3 drafts, and then all the way through. And I will say that in this pile, book 4 is the most sparse and it is the one that needs the most work. It's not ready yet, for sure. Like none of these are ready yet. That's why they're not books. But book 4 for sure needs a bit more editing than the other 2, like developmental editing stuff. I recognise that, and part of the reason for that is complicated, but basically there are side stories, like side books, Claretbury Companions is what I've been calling them, that exist within the Claretbury Chronicles universe, and I need to work on those a bit more to figure out when they happen in the timeline before I can solidly land on exactly what happens in book 4. But at the same time, book 4 is finished. Like, it is complete. It's just not... It's complete. It's just not finished. Like, there might be some little tweaks and changes to make, but fundamentally the story is all there. So, like, it's currently with feedback people, so I will find out if it actually needs an overhaul, a redraft, or if it just needs a couple of edits, but jazz hands. So, the reason that I have written it so differently. Like, and again, like, I've just immediately gone through, like, this is how I write books, and that's how I've written Claretbury differently. Is that, like, I keep just redrafting. And with Claretbury, I redrafted book 1 and then into book 2 and redrafted them as a whole. And that is fundamentally the difference between Claretbury and other books series. Thank you. That I have written. And the big thing about it is that the reason I've done this is because the Claretbury books are much more tight-knit than any of the other book series I've written, which feels really wild because Interplanetary Alliance books, Unlicensed Delivery and Unlicensed Travel, literally do follow on days after each other. And they are so closely connected. But it is fundamentally different because, okay, when it comes to a series, you basically have it where there's like 2 simultaneous main plot threads. So there's the plot thread that is the overarching series plot, and then there is the plot thread that is the main plot of that individual book. So if we use the Guardian Cadet series, because I always use the Guardian Cadet series because they're my first books, the overarching plot of the Guardian Cadet series is Mary wants to be a Guardian, right? She wants to join the Brotherhood of Guardians, who have never before accepted women. What are we going to do? Sexism, man. What are you going to do? And then in book 1, the plot is, in book 1, Mary Ellen breaking the curse. The plot is breaking the curse, right? Breaking the curse on Raquel Valencia, who is the love interest, the paramour of the Guardian, what's his name? Commander. Doing well. Forgot my own titles for my own book characters. And then in book 2, Mary Ellen finding the heir, it's finding the heir to an elven lordship, right? Like, that's the 2 book plots. But overarchingly, the whole concept of the whole plot is Mary wants to be a guardian. And I think the way that Claretbury is different to those books is where the spotlight shines. So I think the vast majority, or at least the vast majority of books that I've read, the plot of each individual book gets the spotlight, and the overarching series plot is kind of like the set dressing. Let's do stage metaphors, why not? And I think with the Claretbury books, the overarching plot, you never forget it. Like, it never disappears. So in, again, the Guardian Cadet series, and I'm going to try and keep this as spoiler-free as possible, but in the Guardian Cadet series, there is this whole stint where, in both books actually, there's a whole stint where this other part of Mary's life comes to the forefront. And you kind of almost have the option to forget that the goal here is guardianship. Whereas with the Claretbury Chronicles, at no point is Billy thinking about anything other than the main plot, right? Everything that Billy does in the whole of all of the 4 books in this series, Billy is constantly like, how does this feed into my main mission? My main mission is to solve this Claretbury problem. How is this thing that I'm doing on the ground feeding into that? And I think it's a really fun difference because it's quite subtle, right? Like, it's a little bit... It's quite a subtle difference. It's hard to explain. Like, I've tried to explain this a few times before I sat down to film this video so that I could get my words right. And it took me a while to land on a good explanation that, like, made sense and that was clear and that didn't make it sound like each of these Claretbury books doesn't have its own plot, because they do. Each of them has their own plot. They've got their own subplots. It's an exciting time. I actually also, because it's 4 books and therefore it's a lot of words. it's like each of these books is about the same length as a standard Will Saltzman McGrath book, right? Like, I don't write chonkers, generally speaking. I write, comfy, read it in a day or 2, or like you can kind of read it over the course of a week if you've only got 5 minutes. Check out my short stories. But if you want an idea of what it's like my short stories are like a scene each for a book. Like, books are more fleshed out. There's a lot more detail that goes in. They get redrafted and edited and stuff. Whereas my short stories, because I post them every single week, more or less, to nopoodles.wordpress.com, they don't get that same kind of level of dedication, which feels mean. But it's just, I don't know anyone who is willing to pre-read all of my short stories. And also, a lot of the time, I'm running late and I'm posting it like 5 minutes before it's supposed to go live, or notably a fair few times a couple of hours after. One time a whole day late. But anyway, the point is that, like, where was I going? The point is that the short stories are a prime example of what my writing is like, and also like how quick it can be to read my writing. And also, please note that I mean, you can check out my first chapters on nopoodles.wordpress.com as well, which is probably a better example. Like, you can't read Claretbury first chapter yet, but anyway, the point is that that'll give you a guideline. But most of my books, they're designed to be easy reads, right? That's the point I'm trying to make. They're not chonkers. This one is 269 pages of story, right? And so I don't want anyone to get the impression that it's 269 pages of story, but it doesn't actually have a story at any point. Like, it's got, getting back to the point that I was actually trying to make, which is, it's a lot more than I'm used to. Like, this is 269 pages of story. Like, my longest book is 360 pages, I think, of story. And like, the longest book I've ever written was 80,000 words. So far. Longest book I've ever written was 80,000 words. Most of my books sit, but like, they're into novel length. Some of them just. Like, Welcome to Humanity is very short. I keep calling it a short novel because it is a short novel, right? And like, not the fighting kind, the first, not that kind of dandy book, is also a short novel. And then you get like the medium ones, which is like this, and Not the Fainting Kind, are comparable. And then you get like my longer novels, which again, 80,000 words. Like, these are not chunkers, right? And there's a whole variety of reasons for that, but I won't go into those here. But basically, I don't want anyone to get the... I don't want anyone to get... I keep fixating on the idea. I don't want anyone to get the impression that there's not a real story here. There is a real story here. But no, my point is that if each of these is, call it 65,000 words, which is approximately, I think, what they average out to. So if each of these is 65,000 words, I should have picked an easier number. If each of these is 60,000 words, because it's an easier number to work with, and there are 4 of them, 6 times 4 is 24, which is 240,000 words, which is obviously a lot more than, again, my longest novel is 80,000 words. Like, 240,000 words is a lot more than that. It's like 3 times that. Check that out, that was fast maths. Anyway, so in order to keep it all sorted, and also to make sure that, because this is set in like the real world, it's a fictionalized town, because monsters in it. It's a fictionalized British town, specifically. It's a fictionalized town, but it is also like set in a real year. So this year specifically, 2026, and it literally starts, I think, the day after it comes out, which I think is really cool. But anyway, the point is that because it's a real time period in the real world, and because there's werewolves in it, the moon was really important to get right. So I made myself a calendar and a timeline of everything that happens in the books, which means that I had a layout of every single thing that happens in it, which means that I know exactly what the main plot is and any potential subplots and stuff like that. And I say potential, they are like solidly text subplots now. I'm pointing at you, you can't even see the book. Wait, can I do that? No, okay. But yeah, like, there are lots of pieces in this, but and like the timeline of it. And again, this is another prime example of how writing Claretbury Chronicles was different, is that I have done timelines for other books before, but previously each of those timelines is its own individual thing. So like book 1 gets its own timeline, and then book 2 potentially gets its own timeline. Not everything gets a timeline. So like, not that kind of dandy. Not the Fighting Kind got its own timeline, and then I went back through and redid Not the Fainting Kind from its original inception. Did I explain? I wrote those out of order. That's relevant to this conversation. Then I did the Not the Fainting Kind timeline, and like, again, also when I did the Guardian Cadet timelines, it was very much that I did book 1's timeline, and then as a whole separate document I did book 2's timeline, and I literally just put events of book 1 as the start of the timeline. Events of book 1, however much time is between the 2 books, and then I carried on. And like, I didn't do timelines for Interplanetary Alliance books because it didn't seem so necessary, partially because each of the chapters is a timeline by itself. Like, when you look at the first Interplanetary Alliance book, Unlicensed Delivery, it's like 15 days before liftoff, and then we get into the secondary assessment, and we've got day 1 through to day whatever of that secondary assessment. Then we start our tertiary assessment when we do day 1 through to however many, and like, each chapter heading is by itself a timeline piece. So all I had to figure out was, does it happen on the same day or does it happen on a different day? So in my like draft version of it, I just kept putting in some time passes, and then I figured out as I was putting it all together finally how much of that time had passed. And I ended up having to do like some wrangling, because in the original version of it, the secondary assessment lasted too long because I had laid out in detail exactly how long I wanted each of these sections to last. So there was some wrangling that had to go on there, but like, there was no timeline because I didn't need to be. Whereas with something like especially with something like Mary Ellen breaking the curse, because Mary is a university student in that book, she has a university timetable, and I had to figure out what that university timetable was so that it wasn't going to be one of those things. I've read books where they do this, where it's like, hang on a minute, you haven't been to class in like 18 plot points. What's happening? Are you just skipping out now? So I had to make sure that everything lined up with Mary's like class schedules for university. And then Mary starts doing a training thing as well. So then it's like, okay, now we're into the training phase of things. How does that fit in with the class schedule? And I ended up with like a bunch of different university timetables. And then I would just put in plot points around that. And again, this is the thing of like, there was some wrangling, but basically I'd written a whole draft, and then I was there like, oh no, Mary has class. And I had to go back and change it. And like, I didn't do that with Claretbury. With Claretbury, it's very much, I started out, I did book 1, and then I was there like, I have to figure out the timetable for this, because I knew, like, I realised I needed a moon. That was the other thing I had with Mary. Moons are very important in Mary because they're a great time-telling device, and also they provide a very romantic setting for the romantic subplot. Whereas in Claretbury Chronicles, moons are important because werewolves exist. And obviously, like, they're the standard werewolves. The full moon makes them turn into wolves. And I had to figure out, like, when is the full moon? And therefore, when are the werewolf characters, A, turning into werewolves, and B, therefore not around? And C, like, anything else that needs to happen with the moon. How long has Billy been in Claretbury anyway? What's going on with that? So I basically started, like, within the drafting of book 1, I started making this timeline because I realised how important that knowledge was, and I couldn't reliably make the plot happen if I couldn't fit it to a real timeline, especially because it's urban fantasy. And I think that's like a very specific thing about urban fantasy. I think any book can benefit from a timeline, especially if you struggle to process the passage of time like me. But I think that with an urban fantasy book, because they are set in the real world, you really do have to like adhere better to reality. And like, I don't think that the vast majority of readers are going to go out and find a moon timetable. Moon timetable? Whatever. The moon timetable to look at and be there like, oh, you said the moon's on Thursday, but it's not until Sunday. Like, I don't think the vast majority of readers are going to go out and do that. But for anyone who cares that much, I did my due diligence, and the moon is at the right time. Now, obviously, I will put the disclaimer here that if something dramatic happens between now and, October 2026, or in October 2026, that just doesn't touch Claretbury, because I wrote this before the time had actually passed. In the same way that I read that, it was shared around online. I don't know if it's a real review, but somebody read a book that was written in, I want to say the 80s. I'm not sure. It was written at some point. It was a dual timeline book. And one of the timelines was 2020. And it was written way before 2020. But one of the timelines was 2020. And somebody left a bad review because it didn't mention the pandemic. And it's like, that's because that hadn't happened yet. And nobody was prepared for it. But anyway, the point is that Claretbury is different because the main plot is the series plot is the main plot. And everything else kind of becomes a subplot. So even though, like I said, this does have its own plot, and then book 2 has its own plot, and book 3 has its own plot, and book 4 has its own plot, they never forget, you never forget as the reader, that Billy is there to solve the Claretbury problem. That the Claretbury problem is the cause of every single event that occurs in this book. Every single one. That never goes away. I think also the blurb of the first book, I love this when this happens. The blurb of the first book is an excellent overarching blurb for all of them. Do you know what? I'll just casually read it to you now. Which is, on those rare clear days, Claretbury is, well, dead. Claretbury is an unassuming town, where fog hangs heavy enough over the landscape for even the most sensitive vampire to walk outside during the day. That's probably why a vampiric mob took over the town generations ago. But recently, things have started to change in Claretbury, and not for the better. That's where Billy comes in. Arctoy stand bastion against the supernatural threat. They take out vampires who try to snack on unsuspecting humans. They destroy covens summoning evil into the world. They prevent apocalypses. Most people only do that once. Billy has been on the job longer than most. With 16 years under their belt, there's nothing Billy wants more than a break. Instead, they get Claretbury. That's the whole series. And again, book 1 is the Billy goes to Claretbury book. And then book 2 is... Oh my god, what happens in book 2? Book 2 is the thing of it didn't work. My whole plan isn't enough. There's still more to do, kind of thing. And then, like I said, that really ties into that main plot. It's not, you couldn't take that in a vacuum. In the way that you definitely could pick up, you could pick it up in a vacuum, but I wouldn't advise it. And it's much more a thing for me where I'm there, especially with the Not That Kind of Dandy series, where I'm there, you can read them in whatever order you want. Chronologically, obviously, that makes the most sense. But ultimately, if you picked up book 2, you could totally read book 1 as a prequel. That's not a problem. And I think it's also true for most of my other book series, right? If you picked up Unlicensed Travel first, and then you were like, oh shoot, this was a sequel, you could totally read Unlicensed Delivery after. Whereas with Claretbury, I think that is much, much less possible. And I did my due diligence. I put the work in to make it as possible as possible. Because I know that sometimes people pick up book 2 first. But I do think these ones especially benefit from being read in the right order. So, yeah. Claretbury is different. It's a vampire mob run town. And I hope that you will enjoy going there with Billy, if it interests you. Am I going to keep writing books this way? I don't know. Maybe. Maybe not. It depends on the books. So the books I'm currently working on, you can find out in my previous video, which is my annual works in progress video, where I talk about what I've been working on. But For now, I don't have another series planned like Claretbury, where it's this very core intrinsic, like, this is the main story is the main story, like the series story is the main story. I don't have another one of those on the radar right now, but that might change. It probably will at some point. Yeah, I hope you found this entertaining. If you want more information about Claretbury or any of my other books, you can find all the information that you need to find me all over the internet in the description box below, right next to the like and subscribe buttons, if you feel like sticking around for next time, where I will be doing something else probably. And if you're thinking, Will, I want to know, when's the Claretbury book trailer coming? Because I make book trailers for all of my books. The answer is, my laptop died. After 12 years of use, my laptop finally died, and now I am working on my wife's laptop instead, and it doesn't have any of the stuff that I used to make those book trailers, so it's slightly delayed. I'm still working on it. I'm going to do my best to make it happen, but I don't know exactly when it's going to happen. Also, since we got Achilles, who's my little white cat, it has been much harder to find a quiet space in the house to make the, like, I know it's been relatively quiet now, but for book trailers it's got to be completely quiet. I can't have Porthos trotting around. I can't have Ayla lying on the edge of this sofa making little deflating noises as she falls asleep, you know, like, it's one of those things. It's got to be a really quiet environment to get the vocals for it, and I just haven't had that either. Even if I had the software access, I haven't had a quiet space. But I am working on it. It will happen. I promise it will happen at some point. I'm not going to leave you book trailerless. I will see you next month, because I'm back down to one a month because my life is chaos and everything is too hard. Bye.